What if the greatest dream of your life wasn't just difficult, but completely impossible? What if you knew from the very beginning that no matter how hard you tried, you would never succeed? Would you still spend your entire life chasing it? Most people would probably say no. After all, success is what gives effort its meaning. Why climb a mountain you can never reach? Why search for an answer that doesn't exist? Why dedicate your life to something that will always remain beyond your grasp? And yet history is filled with people who did exactly that. They sailed into oceans that had no maps. They climbed peaks no one believed could be climbed. They imagined flying centuries before anyone knew it was possible. Every generation has people who seem irrational, people willing to devote their lives to dreams the rest of the world calls impossible. Sometimes they fail. Sometimes they change history. Thousands of years ago, ancient China told the story of one such person. His name was Kuafu. Today, most people remember him as the giant who chased the sun. At first, the story sounds almost absurd. A man trying to catch the sun. A dream so impossible that even a child knows it cannot be done. But perhaps that isn't the real story. Perhaps the real question isn't why Kuafu chased the sun. Perhaps the real question is why anyone would choose to chase the impossible in the first place. To understand that, we have to forget almost everything we think we know about this legend. Because this story was never really about the sun. It was about something much closer to us. Long before telescopes, satellites, or modern science, the sun was one of humanity's greatest mysteries. Every morning it appeared in the east. Every evening it disappeared beyond the western horizon. It brought warmth and light, determined the harvest, and marked the passing of time. It gave life to the world, yet no one knew where it came from or where it went. To the ancient world, the sun wasn't just another object in the sky. It represented power itself, and power has always fascinated human beings. Some people worshipped it, others feared it. But one man looked at the sun and wondered if it could be reached. Ancient texts never tell us exactly what Kuafu was thinking. They never explain what inspired such an unbelievable decision. That silence may be intentional, because the reason itself is less important than what it represents. Every generation has its own impossible dream. For some, it's wealth. For others, it's knowledge. For some, it's freedom. For others, it's love. The dream changes, but the feeling never does. One morning, Kuafu made his choice. He would not admire the sun from a distance. He would not pray to it. He would not simply watch it rise and disappear like everyone else. He would follow it, not for a day, not for a week, for as long as it took. The people around him laughed. How could they not? You cannot catch the sky. You cannot outrun daylight. You cannot chase something that never stops moving. But Kuafu had already taken his first step. Sometimes the first step is the moment every impossible journey truly begins. So he ran. He crossed valleys, rivers, and forests untouched by human hands. His footsteps shook the earth beneath him. Mountains seemed like hills beneath his stride, and the world rushed past faster than anyone had ever imagined possible. Hour after hour, he ran toward the blazing light. Then, for a brief moment, something extraordinary happened. It almost seemed as if the distance between him and the sun was shrinking. Perhaps everyone else had been wrong. Perhaps the impossible is only impossible until someone is willing to chase it. The first day felt different. The sun still hung high above the horizon, shining with the same brilliant light. But Kuafu believed he had made progress. Every great journey begins with the feeling that the destination is getting closer, even when it isn't. So he kept running. Morning became afternoon. Afternoon slowly faded into evening. The golden sky turned deep red. And for the first time, Kuafu believed victory was within his reach. He stretched out his hand. Just one more step, just a little farther. But before he could touch the light, the sun disappeared behind the mountains. It wasn't because he had reached it. It was simply the end of another day. The following morning, the sun rose once again, exactly where it had always been, as if nothing had happened, as if all of Kuafu's effort had changed absolutely nothing. Most people would have stopped there. One failed attempt is often enough to convince us that the impossible is truly impossible. But Kuafu wasn't most people. He began running again. Day after day, the landscape changed around him. Mountains gave way to endless plains. Rivers flowed behind him. Forests disappeared into the distance. The seasons changed, yet only two things remained exactly the same. Kuafu kept running, and the sun kept moving. Eventually, something unexpected began to happen. The people who once laughed at him stopped laughing. Not because they believed he would succeed, but because they had never seen anyone refuse to give up. There is something deeply unsettling about watching another person dedicate everything to a single purpose. It forces us to ask uncomfortable questions. Why does he keep going? What does he see that everyone else cannot? Or perhaps, what have the rest of us stopped believing in? The farther Kuafu traveled, the quieter the world became. Villages disappeared behind him. Roads came to an end. Even the birds seemed unwilling to fly across the endless wilderness ahead. He had entered a place where almost no human had ever stood. The air grew hotter with every step. The ground beneath his feet cracked from the heat. Every breath became heavier than the last, and for the first time, even Kuafu's incredible strength began to show signs of exhaustion. Then he realized something. The sun had never been waiting for him. Every step he took forward was matched by another step beyond his reach. The distance never truly became smaller, it only felt that way. Perhaps this is the moment every impossible dream reveals its true nature, the moment when effort no longer guarantees progress, the moment when the finish line refuses to move any closer, the moment when every new step demands more than the one before it. This is where most people turn back. Not because they are weak, but because they begin asking a different question. What if everyone else was right? What if this really is impossible? Perhaps Kuafu asked himself the very same question. The ancient storytellers never tell us. Instead, they simply tell us that he continued running. Sometimes what a story chooses not to say reveals far more than what it does. The sun climbed higher into the sky. Its heat became almost unbearable. The wind carried no coolness, and the rivers that once refreshed him became fewer and farther apart. His throat burned, his lips cracked. Even the strength that could shake mountains could no longer silence one simple feeling: thirst. Not the thirst of an ordinary traveler, not even the thirst of a giant, but the thirst of someone who had given everything and still could not reach what he sought. For the first time since this impossible journey began, Kuafu slowed down. Not because he had lost his courage, but because even legends must answer to the limits of the human body. Ahead of him, the sun continued its silent journey across the sky, untouched, unreachable, and waiting for no one. There comes a moment in every impossible journey when the greatest obstacle is no longer the destination. It becomes yourself. Kuafu's legs were still powerful. His determination had never faded, but his body had begun asking for something that even determination could not provide. Water. Every breath burned like fire. The earth beneath his feet radiated unbearable heat, and even the wind offered no relief. Yet every time he looked toward the horizon, the sun remained exactly where it had always been, close enough to inspire hope, far enough to destroy it. Most stories celebrate persistence. Very few talk about its cost. Because every dream demands something in return. Sometimes it asks for your comfort. Sometimes it asks for your youth. Sometimes it asks for your relationships. And sometimes it asks for everything. By now, Kuafu had already sacrificed too much to stop. The world behind him had disappeared long ago. There was no home waiting for him, no crowd cheering for him, no promise that victory even existed. There was only one direction left: forward. The ancient storytellers never describe Kuafu as angry. They never say he cursed the heavens or blamed the sun. That silence matters, because this was never a battle against the sun. It was a battle against the limits of being human. At last, Kuafu reached the Yellow River. Its endless waters stretched across the land like a ribbon of life. Without hesitation, he knelt beside the river and drank. He drank until the mighty river was empty, but his thirst remained. So he continued. Soon he found another great river. Again he drank until nothing remained. Again it wasn't enough. Whether these events truly happened isn't the point of the legend. The story is trying to tell us something much larger than history. Some kinds of thirst can never be satisfied, no matter how much the world gives you. For the first time, the impossible no longer looked beautiful. It looked terrifying. The dream that had once filled Kuafu with purpose had slowly begun consuming him instead. Yet even then he refused to stop, because impossible dreams follow a strange rule. The more we sacrifice for them, the harder it becomes to let them go. Every mountain Kuafu had crossed, every river he had left behind, every step he had taken, seemed to whisper the same words. You've already come too far to turn back now. Perhaps you've heard that voice before. Not while chasing the sun, but while chasing something else? A career you no longer loved. A relationship that had already ended. A version of success that no longer felt like your own. Sometimes we keep running, not because the dream still matters, but because we've already invested too much of ourselves to admit that it no longer does. As evening approached, the sky slowly changed color. The brilliant gold of the afternoon faded into deep crimson. The sun drifted lower toward the horizon. Kuafu looked up. For one brief moment, it seemed closer than ever before. He smiled. He took one last breath. Then he ran again. One final time. The next morning, the sun rose again exactly as it always had. The rivers continued to flow. The birds continued to sing. The mountains stood in silence. The world moved on. Only one thing had changed. Kuafu could no longer run. The ancient legend tells us that, after pushing himself beyond every limit, he finally collapsed before reaching the sun. His body surrendered to a journey that his spirit had refused to abandon. And there, at the edge of the world he had crossed, the giant fell. For many people, that is where the story ends. A foolish man chased the impossible. He failed. The end. But legends rarely survive for thousands of years because of simple endings. Before his final breath, Kuafu is said to have thrown down the wooden staff he had carried throughout his journey. Where it touched the earth, something extraordinary happened. A vast forest began to grow. Trees reached toward the sky. Branches stretched across the empty land. Their leaves cast cool shadows over the burning ground. Their fruit fed weary travelers. Their roots drew water from deep beneath the earth. Long after Kuafu was gone, others continued their journeys beneath those trees. Perhaps that was always the true ending. Not every dream exists to be achieved. Some dreams exist to leave the world different from the way we found it. History remembers countless people who never lived to see the future they helped create. Explorers who never reached the lands they searched for. Scientists whose discoveries were ignored during their lifetimes. Artists who died believing they had failed. Parents who sacrificed everything so their children could live better lives. From the outside, many of them looked like failures. History tells a different story. Perhaps success has never been the only measure of a meaningful life. Perhaps the value of a journey is found not only in where it ends, but in what it leaves behind. Maybe Kuafu never expected the sun to stop. Maybe he understood that some goals are too great to be possessed. They exist only to pull humanity forward. Every civilization leaves behind stories. Some explain the world. The greatest ones explain ourselves. For thousands of years, people believed this legend was about a giant chasing the sun. But perhaps the sun was never the real destination. Perhaps it represented every impossible dream humanity has ever dared to pursue. Every cure that once seemed impossible. Every ocean people believed could never be crossed. Every invention the world laughed at before it changed history. Every impossible dream begins with someone willing to be called a fool. Every morning, millions of people wake up and begin chasing their own sun, a dream, a purpose, a better life, someone they love, a future they may never reach. Most of us will never know whether we will succeed. Neither did Kuafu. He simply believed that some dreams were worth chasing, even if the finish line remained forever beyond the horizon. So perhaps this legend was never asking whether Kuafu caught the sun. Perhaps it has been asking us a far more difficult question all along. If you knew your greatest dream could never be reached, would you still choose to chase it? Because in the end, the measure of a life may not be how many dreams we capture. It may simply be whether we had the courage